welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back with another Hong Kong content review, diving back into the wonderful world of Wong Kar-Wai, and my first time viewing experiences were on number 3 in my filmography from Wong Kar-Wai, Chungking Express, which is quite a big one for a lot of people. This is a very massive impact in terms of, you know, cultural cinema and just, you know, the themes, the cinematography, the performances. There's a massive impact on Western audiences, with Quentin Tarantino picking the film up for distribution within the kind of US and UK kind of market. So it's definitely got a lot of attention compared to the first two initial movies. This kind of really put Wong Kar-Wai on the map, on the radar for a lot of people within Hong Kong, but outside of Hong Kong as well, as a big kind of, you know, influential kind of, you know, big statement director that's writing, directing, and really getting behind these movies. And the fact he did this film, you know, in between productions with another film he was doing at the same time, Ashes of Time, is definitely shows how talented he is, how passionate he is, and how creative he can be with just a kind of a simple premise, you know, some guerrilla style filmmaking, big idea, great performances, and a lot of passion. Let's talk about Chungking Express.
Follow your hands, give me a sign, hold down your lies, lay down next to me, don't listen when I'm screaming, bury your doubts and fall asleep, for neither ever nor never.
Chungking Express was released in 1994, roughly the same time as Ashes of Time, made and kind of put together and kind of created during production. Again, a director that's always challenging himself, doing something against conventions, you know, touching upon different themes, pushing on different genres, and doing something a little different each time, but also taking a little piece of each one and just kind of expanding upon it, doing more with it. And this film he did, you know, as mentioned, you know, he filmed it, he directed it, he wrote it, he got a bunch of actors together, said, hey look, let's make a film within Hong Kong, and that's a lot of fun doing. And this film, compared to Days of Being Wild, is something very different yet again. You know, all 3 films I've seen so far up to this point, 3 very individual films. I'd say this is more of like an extension of what Days of Being Wild is about, considering that film's about, you know, self-worth and kind of choices and being stuck in a kind of a time and a place, and raw, much more kind of, you know, generational kind of, you know, talking point about companionship, about love, about falling in love, about the complications of what love is and how we deal with it, you know, from emotional raw level as mature adults within, you know, having careers or just kind of having temporary work, or being, you know, in law enforcement, a stewardess, you know, someone who works behind a kind of a deli kind of, you know, restaurant counter, you know, different people from walks of life, and how we kind of perceive love, how we perceive companionships, and how we deal with our own kind of, not self-worth this time around, but more the idea of who are we as an individual. You know, are we complete? Do we crave to be, you know, surrounded by someone that we love, and, you know, friends that we love? And this film tackles upon this in a very different way compared to what Days of Being Wild was. And, you know, this film, I feel like, is a lot more, you know, modern, obviously set within during the kind of modern time, during the kind of the early 90s, compared to the last one being set during the 60s, so it's definitely much more of a modern kind of approach to it. And this film, you know, takes more risk, it takes more chances.
It has just like this wonderful, this wonderful romantic comedy flavor to it, while at the same time being encapsulated in this crazy, frenetic Hong Kong world.
A lot more so compared to Days of Being Wild. I feel Days of Being Wild was definitely much a you know, thought out, planned out, kind of definitely a feature movie that was, you know, constructed, that had a little bit of problem towards the end, but they managed to cap it off with just the final scene. And you can feel there's like a full realised movie there, and it, you know, you can watch it and really enjoy it, and all the points really connect together. This film is a lot more loose, it's a lot more kind of disjointed in a good way, in a fun way that I think keeps the film kind of energy and the kind of the passion of Hong Kong, the city life, nighttime life of these characters alive, which I really appreciate. Definitely guerrilla style filmmaking for sure, with a lot of scenes which I don't think he's supposed to be in those locations. He definitely kind of, you know, plays fast and loose with some of those specific places, but he definitely uses one or two you know, locations multiple times, just down to the nature of these characters in the story, with the apartment buildings, the kind of deli sort of, you know, takeaway kind of restaurant, and a few bar locations here and there, maybe a flat here and there kind of thing. Just a few prime locations was like definitely locked in, but anything to do with like airports or kind of market streets or anything to do on the streets definitely feels like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this type of thing. And I really appreciate it because it's done in a really fun, creative manner, and it's not done in an amateur manner. It's, you know, it's kind of deliberately kind of loose and fast and very much kind of floaty kind of thing. If the last film was much like dream kind of escape kind of thing, you know, very fever-like, almost like purgatory, and how these characters are kind of isolated in that world, this film feels so alive and so, you know, the world itself is moving such in a lightning speed, and I quite like the idea of this kind of slow motion kind of, you know, colours and kind of resuming by kind of thing. You know, everyone feels like all this time is going past them, all this life is going in between these characters, and, you know, we're focusing on the initial four. The first part of the film, I would say, the first half an hour-ish, is more of an introduction, I would say. It's more of a kind of a getting to know what this film is trying to offer, and it touches upon just two characters, a police officer and a woman that is dressed in a wig and has got glasses on, who is essentially like, what, an assassin, who's a drug dealer, someone who is chosen a life of crime. You've got two opposite ends of the kind of law there, and the one character is recently broken up with his kind of girlfriend, and his, you know, thinking and his talking points is, you know, if I find a can of pineapples with the expiry date May 1st because they broke up on April Fool's, then you know, the love, the connection, the passion will not expire. And it's the idea of holding on to something which sometimes we can't always keep hold of. You know, we definitely dives into the ideas how we react to these things and how we kind of treat it and how we kind of take it personally. We never know that conclusion of that story. What's the point of this? And the film Chungking Express as a whole is just a day in a life, another slice of life about love, companionship, adults living in a world, you know, a time and a place where we just want to find connection, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes we miss our chances, sometimes we're holding on to things that we shouldn't be holding on to, or sometimes it does work out, and, you know, we're so close to what our dreams is. And one of the things I do love about the second act of the film, the two initial main characters that we do get to, the second portion of the film is definitely the true core of the film, and the true kind of heart and soul of what the film's trying to go for.
And I'm sorry, I don't think I'll ever be able to see California Dreaming again without, like, seeing Faye Wong do her little dance. It's, yeah, she's,
you know, really well made in terms of just, you know, scenes go on for longer than they probably should, or maybe, you know, there's a repetitive nature of music, but I like the themes of it. You know, the idea that we have Brigitte Lin's character and we have Tony Leung's character, which is from a brief cameo within the last movie, but he becomes a bit of a Wong Kar-Wai regular. We know Tony Leung from you know, Shang-Chi and Infernal Affairs. Brigitte Lin was also in Police Story 1, and I think she's been in a few other smaller movies here and there, but she did a very small kind of acting kind of career before quitting acting during the kind of late 90s, I believe. So she didn't last into acting very long, but she gives a fantastic performance, and definitely a very specific style of the early 90s, which I really do appreciate, I really do love. It's like this connection, you know, he's a police officer, she's someone who's very kind of free-spirited and just kind of a daydreamer, and you know, wants to, you know, find something better out there, and she works behind this kind of takeaway counter, and there's a connection between them two, not quite traditional as, you know, a typical Hollywood movie would do, or even what the last movie we've tried to dive into. It definitely feels very raw, it feels very just kind of curiosity, and just kind of they're interested in each other a little bit, but they don't really say anything, and this is really explored in a very fun way. It definitely has a bit of comedy aspects to it, has some cute aspects, has some, you know, invasive you know, intrusion of kind of, you know, privacy as well, in terms of some of the actions that Brigitte Lin's character does. She has a kind of this fascination with, you know, California Girls, you know, the song that keeps playing over and over again, and even though it's like it's repeated throughout the entire film, you get why she's doing it, you get why that she's, you know, playing this track over and over again to drown out thoughts, to drown out the situation she's in. Same with Tom Lung's character, you know, someone who's, again, holding on to an ex-girlfriend, a stewardess, they've had a very intense relationship, and he's hoping that maybe she'll come back, and he's holding out for that, and not seeing the person in front of him. A specific dialogue, specific kind of exchange between those two characters are really wonderful. They're really nice. It just feels like the film feels good. It feels like a good energy. It's definitely a lot more upbeat compared to the last two movies, for sure. The first two are a lot more kind of tension-filled, a lot more kind of dreadful nature in the sense, a lot more depressing nature of those two movies. But this one feels nicer in a weird way, but also at the same time definitely challenges you as an audience member, definitely gets you into that kind of headspace. Despite the fact that the nature and how this film was put together, it feels still like an actual feature film. The cinematography is on point, the editing, even though it's a little bit more disjointed in the best way, the editing and some of the scenes flow a lot longer than they probably should. I definitely feel like everything's in there to kind of expand upon this world, and you know, I enjoyed my visit to Hong Kong within this movie and within these characters, and you know, I definitely would have seen like more of this for sure. If there was like a sequel or continuation, I'd be very happy to see more of this world and to see where those characters end up. And I think that's the key thing. If you can get characters that you can get behind, if you can get scenarios and, you know, relationships that you really want to see continue, or you want to see where they end up, or you wonder where you have a discussion, you have conversation, that's a good sign of a movie. You know, it's when characters that you don't care, you're not invested, you know, you have no memory after watching the film. That's when the film kind of fails a little bit, in my personal opinion. And this film definitely will stick in my mind for quite some time. And you know, the behind the scenes work and some of the kind of deleted scenes are very interesting. Also on the Criterion box set, there's definitely some interesting kind of, you know, behind the scenes nature. There's an episode called Moving Pictures, which talks about Wong Kar-Wai's kind of moving city and how he kind of made the film during the kind of in between production. So that's a very interesting extra. Brand new 4K transfer is great as well. It definitely has a slight kind of, you know, aspect ratio slightly down a little bit just for the styles of the film, but I think it works really well. I enjoy my time with it. Nowhere near as good as the first two movies, granted, but very, very good film nonetheless for sure. So I absolutely recommend Chungking Express. Thoughts and opinions on Chungking Express? What are your thoughts and opinions, guys? Please comment down below. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions on this one. And for the meantime, guys, time for the reviews. Signing out.
Now, Wong Kar-Wai, for my money, is one of the most exciting filmmakers that has come out since I've personally been making films. His films have an excitement that, all the Hong Kong films kind of have a majority of excitement about them that's different from American films, but his are a little different. It's more like a Godardian influence to them, which is not the way most of the, you know, the John Woo, Jackie Chan style of films are. So it makes them very, very different. I find his work very charged